Ag Spotlight. I'm Chrissy Wozniak. Today, we're going to be talking about an issue that we've been following closely here at North American Ag over the last 2 years, which has taken some twists and turns really over the last decade, but it is gravely important to farmers across the U.S. The WOTUS, or the Waters of the United States rule, and the implications of this ruling could determine the control a producer has over their own land. So joining me today from Washington, D.C. is American Farm Bureau's Senior Director of Government Affairs, Courtney Briggs. Welcome, Courtney, and thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks, Chrissy. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about this very important issue.
So can we just start by, can you give us a little bit of your background?
Sure. So I have been working in Washington, D.C. for about 17 years, and I cut my teeth on Capitol Hill working in the United States Senate. And then after about 6 years there, I jumped to the private sector to work for the National Association of Home Builders. And there I worked on all environmental issues ranging from Clean Water Act to Endangered Species to Clean Air Act issues. And I have been at the American Farm Bureau Federation for the last year and 3 months. And I am really focusing my work here on Clean Water Act issues, WOTUS predominantly. I work on conservation issues. So I stay very busy here.
Yeah, I guess sounds like. And you've now joined 17 other organizations that have just filed a lawsuit against the Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, challenging the Biden administration's final Waters of the U.S. or WOTUS rule. So first, let's get a little background on this. Can you explain the history and evolution of the debate, starting from the Obama administration to the Trump administration and today with the Biden administration?
So you appropriately described it in your introduction, the twists and turns of WOTUS, because we've seen a flip-flopping back and forth of WOTUS regulatory definitions over the last several years. And really, this goes back to the inception of the Clean Water Act, because when Congress wrote the statute, they said they were going to regulate navigable waters, and navigable waters are waters of the United States. And then they stopped there. They did not clearly define what a water of the United States is. So therein lies the issue and the complication. So that leaves the authority to create a regulatory definition to the agencies, the EPA and the Army Corps. And that's why we've been seeing this flip-flopping back and forth, because the opinion of what a WOTUS definition should look like changes with every administration. Right. So going back to the Obama administration, they put forward their 2015 rule, which we found to be very expansive, really greatly expanding the federal government's reach over private property. And that was very problematic. And then we had the Trump administration come in. They offered their navigable waters protection rule, and their interpretation provided a bright line of jurisdiction for landowners. And this is incredibly important for landowners to have that bright line, because there are civil and criminal liabilities attached to Clean Water Act compliance. Wow. So that means that you can be fined exorbitant amounts of money for every day that you are in noncompliance, or you can go to jail. So there are steep penalties, and that's why we really liked we call it the NWPR, the Navigable Waters Protection Rule, because it clearly eliminated jurisdiction over ephemeral features. And when I talk about ephemeral features, I'm talking about areas on the landscape that have the ability to hold water after a rainfall. So we're talking about ditches, we're talking about low spots in a farm field. So when I talk about a low spot in a farm field, people are shocked to hear that that could potentially be regulated by the federal government. Right. That you could potentially have to go to the Army Corps of Engineers to get a Clean Water Act permit, which is not an easy process. It is long, it is laborious. There are many costs associated with it, and it's not just the cost of a permit. It is the cost of delay. It is the cost of mitigation. And there are other federal statutes that are triggered once you get a Clean Water Act permit. You could be subject to Section 7 consultation under the Endangered Species Act, which is also not an easy process to get through. You could be subject to review under the National Historic Preservation Act. So we were very happy when the Trump administration came in and drew that bright line. Unfortunately, here we are again with a new administration. President Biden's EPA has come in and repealed the NWPR, and they have put forward their version of a WOTUS definition. And Chrissy, frankly, it's very troubling. Like I said, that bright line, we need that clarity, we need that certainty, and this rule does not produce that.
Right.
Because it goes back to the use of it's called the significant nexus test. And this test came out of a 2006 very convoluted Supreme Court decision, Rapanos versus the EPA. It was a split decision. And this test essentially allows the Army Corps to assert jurisdiction on the landscape on a case-by-case determination.
Wow.
And that means that it is a very subjective test. So you are beholden to whatever Corps official you get assigned. And the use of SIGNEX allows the agencies not only to aggregate waters together so they can really expand their jurisdictional reach, but it also allows them to use terms like in the region or similarly situated or significantly affect that are so ambiguously defined that it gives the agencies the latitude to move in whatever direction they want to. So this is very, very troubling for landowners. Not just for farmers, but all sorts of different industry sectors will be impacted by this.
Yeah. And so for us in the agriculture industry, we don't need any more variables, right? It's hard enough to produce food, and it just seems so obvious that a low spot in your field that fills up every spring when you have heavy rain, it's just a low spot. That's not waters of the United States. But it just seems so obvious to us. But why is the EPA doing this? Do you have any insight there?
Well, there is considerable pressures from the environmental community, which is the base of who elected President Biden. And you have these environmentalists out there saying, well, these low spots, they have a connection to a nearby stream and can impact drinking water. That is certainly not always the case. And there's another statute that we have called the Safe Drinking Water Act that is devoted to protecting our drinking water.
Right.
But to say that a low spot in a farm field that collects water after one rainfall and frankly remains dry throughout the rest of the year is federally regulable is really quite shocking. And that's why we've been in this fight over the last several decades to find clarity here.
Right. And thank you for that. And a year and a half ago, Zippy Duvall stated, clean water and clarity are paramount. And that's why farmers shouldn't need a team of lawyers and consultants just to farm. So in my opinion, that rings truer today than it even did a year and a half ago. And what do you say to that?
Well, I say under this Biden administration's rule, allowing that case-by-case determination to survive will certainly require landowners to rely on environmental consultants, attorneys, engineers in order to use their land. I've asked the agencies, how will a farmer know if an ephemeral feature is jurisdictional on their property? And they tell me, well, a jurisdictional determination from the Army Corps of Engineers is free. So any landowner can go in and ask for a jurisdictional determination. What they don't expose is the fact that getting through that jurisdictional determination process is very difficult. And like I said, you're beholden to one person's decision. So that is insufficient to us. Like you said, there's so many headwinds that our industry faces, so much uncertainty. This is an area where additional regulatory red tape is unnecessary, and it's only hurting the producer. So, we have affordability issues in this country, and these regulatory actions only exacerbate the affordability issues. And I'm not just talking about food and fiber. I'm talking about affordable housing. I'm talking about affordable energy, transportation. All of these sectors are going to be impacted by the WOTUS definition.
Right. Yeah. And how much more expensive can eggs get? Right. That's really how it impacts the consumer, right? It's just food prices go up and up and up. If every farm needs a team of lawyers, who's paying for that? The consumer eventually pays for that.
Yes.
So that's why it's not just farmers here that need to speak up. It's also the consumer. So yeah. So do you have any insight into what's happening with the case Sackett versus EPA?
Sure. So a little bit of potential good news is that the Supreme Court has heard oral arguments in a case called Sackett versus the EPA. And this case is all about WOTUS. It goes back to some landowners in Idaho who were trying to build a home near Priest Lake. And the Army Corps came in and said, cease and desist, you are filling in a wetland. And they used that significant nexus test that I talked about earlier to assert jurisdiction over this piece of property. The Sacketts had their own environmental consultants and, disagreed with the decision from the Corps, and they decided to take legal action. And let me be clear, most landowners do not have the ability to do what the Sacketts have done and take this to the legal courts. Right. This is time, this is money. So, we appreciate the fact that the Sacketts have done this, but most landowners do not have that luxury of being able to fight these issues in court. So the Sacketts have sued, and the question before the court is, can you use the significant nexus test to assert jurisdiction? We feel, and it's always hard to read the tea leaves on these court cases, especially after hearing oral arguments. The justices, many of them don't like to show their cards too early on which direction they're going to go in. But we feel like with this court's makeup and the confusion surrounding significant nexus, that the agencies are going to shoot down the use of this test in some fashion. What that looks like, I don't know, but I think it's very telling the fact that the Supreme Court decided to take this case, because the Supreme Court only takes 1% of cases.
Wow.
And it is highly unusual for them to take a case where there's a pending rulemaking. And I think it's because the justices realize that there's so much confusion on the ground. They need to provide some sort of clarity, provide some sort of guardrails for the agencies to in order to rein them in and not allow them to expand their regulatory reach.
Right.
So it's hard to say exactly how that decision is going to come down. We do expect a decision sometime in the next few months. And it's very upsetting. And we've been very critical of the agencies for moving forward with this rulemaking when the court hasn't handed down that roadmap on how to use significant nexus.
Yeah.
It's a waste of government resources. It's introducing a new regulatory definition to landowners who are already experiencing a very convoluted permitting regime. Right. So this makes it frankly, it defies logic that they would move forward with this rulemaking when the use of Signex, which is the cornerstone of their rulemaking, is in question and will likely be shot down.
That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you for explaining all of that. I know a lot of it, you try to read through the cases and there's just so much jargon.
Yep.
And yeah, so that was a really great description of what's going on. And is there anything that the audience can do? Everybody is invested in agriculture. Everybody. What can we do? Is there anything we can do to help?
Yes, there is. Well, once the high court hands down a decision in Sackett, the agencies are going to be forced back to the drawing board, and they're going to have to craft a new regulatory definition. They recognize this. It was printed in their unified agenda, which kind of maps out their work for the year. In 2023, they have listed, they refer to it as refinements to the WOTUS definition, but they're going to have to do more than just refine, especially if Signex is completely shot down. So it's important for farmers and ranchers to engage whenever AFBF is putting out a grassroots alert. Whenever there is an open comment period, it is important that farmers and ranchers provide their voice and educate the agencies on how this is going to affect farming operations.
Right.
So that is paramount. I always tell folks, your elected officials, as you speak with them, bring this issue up, tell them your concerns. Because while Congress isn't really taking on this issue, they do a lot to buttress the work that we do at the regulatory level. Additionally, Congress has oversight authority. So, especially now with the Republicans taking over the House, there is an opportunity for members of Congress to ask questions that the regulated community cannot ask. So it's important that we continue to educate folks on why this is such an important issue. And that's why I'm so glad that you're having this as a topic on your podcast, because I think a lot of folks don't recognize the impact that this will potentially have on agriculture. And we need to be no one's going to tell our story except for us. So we need to do that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And where can people find more information?
If you go to our website, www.fb.org/WOTUS, you can find more information and all sorts of talking points and materials that can be used.
Wonderful. And I have one last question for you. Why do you do what you do? What is your passion in all of this?
Oh, good question. Well, I kind of stumbled into this work, but as I started to learn more about it, it really became a property rights issue. And I don't have a farming background. But I'm passionate about letting landowners do what they want to do, produce what they want to produce on their land without the federal government coming in and dictating how they do it, when they do it, or if they can do it. Right. So, throughout my time working for home builders, throughout my time working for agriculture, these are hardworking people, mostly small businesses trying to comply with this regulation. And I've realized the injustice, and let me be clear, I, like our farmers, very much care about the environment. I very much care about water quality. Our farmers work and live in the same area. So of course their priority is cleaning the environment, having clean water to use. We're in a water dependent enterprise. So it is so important, but this heavy-handed top-down regulatory activity that we've seen time and time again is very concerning. And I think that landowners deserve better.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, great explanation. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Courtney. This is a big issue and I really appreciate your analysis.
Yeah, no problem. Happy to do it.
And thanks to all who are watching or listening. If you want more information, all the links are provided in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to North American Egg Spotlight on YouTube, Rumble, or Telegram channels, or Egg Fuse. And the podcast is available on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And have a great day.